Love is a high-risk behavior. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast, High Risk for Heartbreak. I am your host, Christina, and I'm so glad you decided to join me, especially for this mini series. If it's your first time here, I want to welcome you to the space. Feel free to go back 5, 6, 7 episodes, and you will find that we are in the midst. We're actually almost done with a mini series that I was bringing to you guys called Creating the Space for the Gift of Love. And it has been such a blessing to me. I hope that you guys have also been blessed by this series. It's been a lot of fun to write it and to really just kind of think about some of the stuff that I have been reflecting back on from this past year and other years in relationships that I have traversed. So in this series, we started out just doing a miniature assessment of ourselves and our relationships and how we are showing up in those relationships. We talked about our heart, what condition the heart is in. Perhaps it may be hardened. You may be in a place where you are acting out of trauma. You may be in a place where you are cynical and you approach your relationships that way, all of them, not just romantic, and that has left your relationships in such a state. We also talked about committing or making a decision to change those patterns of behavior. We talked about making a plan for the change, and then we talked about executing on the change, making a habit out of those behavioral changes. Anytime that you have to make a habit, you have to be very conscious. So we talked about that as well, is just the awareness that it takes to do something like that and to stick to it. And now we are at the place where we have built all of this and we have made this a habitual behavior. And we're experiencing, much like people do, we're getting ready to go back to the gym. Well, not me, I'm always in the gym, but for those of us who are getting ready to go back to the gym for the new year, what you're going to find is a lot of people are going to get to a point where they plateau, and they may fall off that plateau after they're done, but you plateau. And that's exactly where we are right now, or that's what I want to speak to right now, is the plateau that happens after you have created habitual behaviors. The first time I flew on a plane, I think I was 18 years old, maybe I was 17. And that would be considered pretty old, I think, these days for being a first time on a flight. But I grew up driving everywhere. My family, we just traversed not too far from home, and we always traveled by car. So I had no fear of flying, though the turbulence still to this day is something that I think about and I have to get used to. Most times I just try to shut my eyes and just take the ride. I'm like, Lord, if you're taking me, you're taking me. And if not, great. I'd love to get to my destination. I'm going to try my best not to think too much about it. I do remember one flight, and I won't say the name, the airline name, but it starts with an A and has a second A. I was on this flight and I literally I think it was from LA to Boston, and I had my head tucked between my legs the entire time praying because the turbulence was so bad. It was so bad. Was it the winter? I don't know if it was the winter season or not, but honey, I was like, I'll never fly on that particular airline again. And to be honest, I didn't start flying on that airline again until last year. So that goes to tell you something. I kept that promise to myself for a very long time. Well, one of the parts that I love the most about traveling is those 20 or so minutes before the plane is getting ready to land at its destination. There's just something so mind-boggling about the plane descending so slowly. And, if you've ever had window access, you get to look out the window, especially at night, and see all the lights and see the city. You might look out and notice the ground beneath you starts to get closer and closer and grow more realistic looking. You might start seeing trucks and cars, and they look less like ants and more like toy cars. You will find yourself noticing these things. And if you think back on the time that the plane first took off, you can also make a distinction between the energy the jet engines were using to propel the plane forward and the G-forces pushing you back into your seat. You may also feel a touch of excitement maybe, or maybe some anxiety if you have anxiety when you fly and, you consider the obvious dangers of flying, especially these days. You may feel the energy of the start of this flight. But when the plane is landing, it's a different kind of energy, particularly when your flight is close but not yet at your destination. You feel the coast. You feel the energy that was propelling you sort of back off, and the plane uses that residual energy to just push you into this coast in the friendly skies. You almost feel like you're not moving at times. You're going to come to that point in creating space where your habits are formed, where you're making great relational decisions, you're feeling lighter and clearer, and you're just kind of rinsing and repeating. You might even feel like you're coasting and not much is changing. And that's good. I want you to know you're in the perfect place. This plateau is part of your progress. This suspension of energy is part of the progress of creating space for more loving and fulfilling relationships. I need help with this too because I am always in motion, but there's something really valuable. There's a valuable principle that God has been trying to teach me over the last year, and that is the principle of rest. In fact, it's a universal law. Rest, staying, stilling yourself, abiding, meditating, remaining, coasting. You will plateau. Plateaus, guess what they do? They allow you to look below yourself while you're flying on that plane and see all the progress that you made, all the clearing and all the climbing and all the cleaning and all the cleaving that you have just done in your house and your heart. You get to see that progress. Oftentimes, we will just coast, similarly to how the plane can feel in the sky. And it feels like you're not in motion or you're stagnant, but understand that coasting in your new condition is a beautiful place to be. There are no unnecessary fires that your prior heart conditioning might have had, the desire to start. And that means there's no fires to put out. We are coasting in our new habits and our new behaviors, and we are safe. This doesn't dismiss that for many of us, we can begin to have feelings of angst maybe in this process because of this part of the process, because we have become so accustomed to action and to movement in our relationships. We have become so accustomed to destructive patterns of behavior. We've become so familiar with that kind of thing. And the opposite of that can feel boring. It can feel stagnant. It can feel especially unfamiliar because unfortunately, we were used to chaos in our relationships. We were used to that kind of takeoff energy, that start energy. Getting used to stillness, coasting, and boredom may be hard for you, but it's a necessary part of finding your peace between heartbreaks and between healing. Get acquainted with the peace of coasting and use this time to abide in the bosom of the Father. If you can be okay with the peace now, you will be more likely to require it in your future, especially your future relationships. You had to get rid of some things. And I know it hasn't been easy, but now is the time to coast. You are almost there, but abide here. Be here with God in the air, in the void of the unfamiliar. Abide on the plateau. God is getting ready to shift your ability to love to the next level. I'll see you on the next one. Why don't you stay a little longer? You like what you like, right? Subscribe to the channel so we can spend a little more time together, and maybe comment your thoughts because I care what you're thinking. Love is the risk and the reward.